You've had that experience, right? Yeah. I feel like it's an exclusive brown dude experience thing. If you cycle and have a helmet, especially in winter, because you're wearing like a jumper or something like that, it's
Right.
like over there. I'm like, yeah, every time.
I just want to order some ramen to eat,
Yeah.
please. Like, we would like to acknowledge that we are on stolen Yagara and Turrbal lands, and as settlers of colour, we reflect upon the damaging legacy of colonisation. Always was, always will be.
So my name's Navin. I work for a company called Logan Carry, which is all about getting people on e-bikes. And what we do is lease out family e-bikes.
Okay.
So bikes that are, help carry kids, commute, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just to slowly tease out and trace your path towards here. So upbringing was Malaysia, was that right?
Yeah. So grew up in Malaysia. Dad was Sri Lankan Tamil. Migrant from Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Mum is Punjabi.
Right.
Once again, migrant from Punjab, my grandparents. Grew up in Malaysia, lived there till I was 15. And then my sister was moving over here for school and Dad was like, join her. So about a month later, I turned
Just
up.
the two of you, without the parents?
My mum came along.
Okay.
My mum came along.
Right.
So we moved up here 2004.
Mm-hmm.
It was the hottest summer. I remember we didn't have air conditioning. We had air conditioning in one room and it was boiling hot.
Right. And moving up here being Mianjin, Brisbane, that's where you...
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah.
Right.
So moved in 2004, high school, university down the Gold Coast. Typical Asian upbringing. I had three choices: law, medicine, or accounting.
Okay.
And ended up doing a law and business
Not
degree.
engineering.
Not engineering.
Not engineering,
no.
okay.
Did you do engineering?
No, I did none of those. But like when you say three, I mean, it definitely makes sense that you mentioned you put finance in there, but I guess sometimes.
Oh yeah, actually, law,
engineering-
medicine, engineering. You're right. Actually, yeah, engineering. And no, I didn't really like science as much. So did a law and business degree, and then had the dreams of becoming a Big Four top tier partner. Was the 20-year gold.
Yeah.
Ended up in professional services for about 10 years. And realized I genuinely hated working for large corporations. But I worked with a lot of startups. So that's kind of moved my angle into working with different startups.
Yeah.
Did that. And over COVID, I had a really cool job, actually. I was working as a finance and ops manager for a YouTube management company. Did that over COVID. I think like a lot of people had a huge crisis of faith, wondering what the hell you're doing with your life.
Yeah.
And wanted to really try and see if I could make the world better in, no Mother Teresa or Greta Thunberg, but try my way. So ended up working for a marketing firm that focused on sustainability and environmentally friendly brands.
Okay.
And it was a fantastic opportunity.
Right.
Before this opportunity came up, really big stuff that I've always been interested in has been around micromobility. And how we can, move that's not in a car, which led me to my current role.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to drill back to, I had three options. Tell me how that plays out and what's that like to experience?
I think at the time you don't really realize. I didn't realize those were my options, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was your upbringing. You probably know, and I guess people who listen to this podcast probably understand, is you don't really see outside university.
Right. Yeah.
Growing up, it was university was the goal.
Yeah.
Through a school, through everything, it was university was the goal. And then as you're getting to that, it's, okay, what are people successful doing? And I use that in quotation marks because successful in Malaysia particularly was when you finish year 10 in Malaysia of grade form 3, you get two options. You get to go to the science stream or the arts stream. The smart students went to the science stream.
Oh.
And because you had to score a certain, I think it was 7 subjects.
Yeah.
And you had to get, seven or nine subjects. I can't remember now. And you had to get number of A's in like central exams, right? And based on your grades, you got into the science stream where you could do science-based subjects, or you got into the arts stream, which means that you do arts-based subjects.
Which meant that you'd failed.
Yeah, where you weren't successful. So everybody wanted to get, so it was always conditioned in me that, doing biology, chemistry, physics, There's something called ad math, and all this stuff
Yeah.
was like signs of success. So as you do that, and then I moved to Australia in year 10, and I was like, I ain't doing any of that subjects.
Right.
Because here's obviously different. And, I did drama in school and legal studies, and I negotiated with my mum that I do one science subject, which was biology. And I guess, but that sort of training, that upbringing, not anything against my parents or anything, but that's just the culture that we, like, I guess, Indians and grew up in, right? Meant that really, for me to be successful, I had to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so I picked law because it was the least sciencey one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And so my parents were based in the Middle East when they were working and saving up to move to Australia. And so I'm familiar with that dynamic of being of brown folks that are working in a kind of very classed system in the Middle East. What was your experience of the dynamic in Malaysia?
See, Malaysia is really interesting when it comes to, and I'll really segment Indians particularly.
Yeah.
There's sort of two types of migrants to Malaysia, Indians. There were the, I guess, white collar workers, which the British brought over.
Yeah.
So, the clerks, the educated one. My grandmother was a headmistress of a school. My grandfather was a clerk on an estate. And then you had the other side, which were the blue collar traditional migrant workers. So there was a pretty big class difference between the two. So that definitely existed in Malaysia. And it was a interesting one because, the Tamils particularly were all sort of the lower caste. They were brought in as migrant workers and things like that.
Would you say that's one of the most significant, like, I wonder if it's between Canada and Malaysia, perhaps Canada tips it over, but would you say that's one of the biggest Tamil diaspora communities?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
Malaysia is huge.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you're right. I think I was looking this up the other day.
Okay.
Malaysia would be right behind like countries like Canada,
There we go.
UK, and things like that. Yeah.
Right. So does that allow what I because I really look at UK and Canada as like really strong hubs for South Asian identity. Do you think there is that in Malaysia, or are they not able to sort of get into the power structures and like what does it feel like that?
Yeah, you definitely don't. They don't get into the power structures in Malaysia, but there is a pretty strong South Asian community. My upbringing was quite different in that sense that I wasn't really brought up as a South Asian. I wasn't really brought up as a Punjabi because I was the mix of the two.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't speak any Indian languages, for
Okay.
example.
Right.
I speak Malay and English.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I was brought up as Malaysian per se. That's kind of where I grew up in, and I think only now later on in life, I'm starting to understand a little bit more about South Asian culture and things like that.
Right. And then so 2004, year 10, I'm guessing you're around age 15, 16.
Yeah.
And you're uprooted from your sort of native place, like everything you'd known up to that point, and you're dropped into Logan, suburban Brisbane.
Yeah.
What? Tell me what is with your sister and your mum?
Yeah.
Is there more members to your family?
Dad came over for a little while to help set us up, but he works in Malaysia, so he went back
family
there.
of 4.
Yeah, family of 4.
Okay.
It's quite interesting. I remember the school we went to, which I loved. I have so much fond memories of it.
Yeah.
They had an international arm, right?
Okay.
Now, from hearing me sound,
This
I grew
is
up
back in Malaysia?
No, this is in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah. So they. So I grew up speaking English.
Right. Yeah.
So English is my first language, even though I got extra time in university. And in high school because it was theoretically my second language. So I came over here, and they have this international school attached to this private schools in Australia where they teach you English and train you up to be able to go into the high school system.
Okay, like a bridging course kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But it's your first language.
Yeah, but so everyone
You
has...
were happy to cruise? Like, what was the...
So I had to go through and do the exam so they can figure out what my level of English is, right?
Yeah.
And so to give you an idea, mum and dad both studied in English. My grandmother was a headmistress and an English teacher. That sort of, so I grew up speaking English.
Yeah.
So we sat in doing this exam, and then they have this conversation with you, and they like talk about, what you do, everything like that. And I was like, oh, I love reading. My favorite author at the time is John Grisham. I'm a 15-year-old kid, right? So I love reading like legal thrillers and all this kind of stuff. And
Were
they're
you
like,
intentionally flexing, or
no, they were just having a conversation. I was like, because I was really into read. I used to love. I was a bookworm when I was younger.
Yeah, okay.
And they're like, okay. Then they sit for this exam, and then they sit for this like to figure out what level of English you are. And then they're like halfway through, they're like, yeah, you don't need to do this. Just go.
Yes, at least they paid you that respect.
Yeah. So they then sent me to the main. Sent my sister and I to the main school. They're just like, yeah, you don't need to spend 6 months because it makes sense, right? You do this English course to bridge you so that you can understand Australian. And go to school at the right grade.
And you have a better level of English than our native speakers. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, just go ahead. And I remember the first day of school, my sister and I, and there's really like we went and got our uniforms, and it's weird, right? You got long socks and like a hat and like all this.
What did you come? What was the uniform standard?
Just shorts and a shirt. So you kind of think of English public school type,
right?
Like a shirt, short sleeve shirt, shorts, white shoes.
But then what you're describing sort of reminds me of like some kind of like Victorian era private school.
Well, most private schools here have, you wear the long socks with the black Clark shoes. Then you've got the hat and the blazer, and it's all this quite foreign stuff, right? So, and the hat's the weirdest thing, right? So I put the hat on. So my sister and I walked to school. Like, right,
wide brimmed brown or something like.
Yeah. So it's like grey hat, white brim hat, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's wearing a hat. And then you go to this school, and it's just this horde of white people coming at you.
in Logan at that
Logan,
time.
yeah.
So that is 90s, like when?
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just this horde of white people coming at you. And I think we had only been in Australia at the time for a couple of weeks. So my sister and mum had come over a few months before to check out the schools and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a huge culture shock to me, which I think is really interesting because, I'd never seen that many white people.
Yeah, because white people would congregate towards international schools in Malaysia, right?
Correct.
And you weren't in one there?
No, I wasn't one there.
And so what was the kind of visibly cultural mix at your school in Malaysia?
Pretty much mix of Chinese, Malays, Indians. Malaysia's a very multicultural country, so you get all those different races intermingling. Few white, white students and things like that.
Okay, there was.
But I'd been to Europe with family at that time before, but really coming, seeing everybody being white was a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, now it's the opposite, right? I've been here now 18 years.
Yeah, particularly in Logan.
No, just in general, right?
Yeah.
I'm used to being the minority when I walk on the street and when I walk around and stuff like that. That when I went to India a couple of years ago, where everybody was Indian, that was the culture shock. That was the switch for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, because I kind of think back to that moment of like school and like all these white students coming at you, white teachers. Everyone's like, I've never seen so many white people in my life.
Right.
And then
over 20 years, you've
I've just got
back.
Yeah, I've flipped.
Yeah.
And I've gotten used to always generally, in Brisbane, more often than not, we're the minority.
Right.
When you walk into a pub, when you walk into a concert, when you walk into a shopping centre.
Yeah.
And then when I went to India for the first time, where everyone looked like me.
Yeah. Which parts of India?
I was just I went to Delhi and just the Golden Triangle for a friend's wedding.
Okay.
And it was a huge culture shock for me.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't used to being the majority again. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Did that sink in? Like, how did it feel after?
Well, yeah, it took me a long time to get used to that.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get used to that. Because, it was definitely a strange thing. I never realized because you get so used to, we don't notice it as much, but because we're always in the minority, you walk out on the street.
Yeah.
But over there, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Right. So I come from like the Burger ethnicity in Sri Lanka. So that's also like a single digit percentage minority in Sri Lanka. So when I went back to Sri Lanka and lived there for some time, I was still othered, and it's like, wait, where are you from? Why didn't you speak properly? Like, these sorts of things. But then after I did at the time I was all set on Sri Lanka because that was my heritage, and I had no interest in this giant, colossal India adventure that all my white Australian friends would just like, oh, my trip's to India, I'm going to go to India. I just had no interest in that. But after being a creative working in Sri Lanka, I met these like incredible next level creatives from India, and I was like, I need to go over there and see what's happening that's producing these people. And when I went over there, I was traveling with a Hindi speaker at the time, so that did help. But and there was parts where that was just useless as well, because like, you know, you would be in Tamil Nadu and I'd have to rely on my dodgy, you know, formative little Tamil, because Hindi was like, what? But the thing that I enjoyed and I experienced for the very first time in India was just being able to disappear.
Yeah, interesting.
Did you feel that when I could just disappear? No one cared, because like the country's so big. There's people that don't speak your language anyway, because there's movement, there's train networks, like people, there's migrant labor. It's kind of more normal for other brown folks or other South Asian folks to not be like, you'll find like Nepalis like right down in the south, or you'll find like the migration for work is huge. And that was just like, I just remember that being such a profound, like I was so used to just being othered in every single space, in every single country. And like, you know, they said, go back to where you came from. And I go back to where I came from. And that still wasn't.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I could be in India that I could just disappear. And that was a very polarizingly different experience to my white Australian friends that travel in their Indian stories as well, right? Because like, obviously they couldn't disappear, and they have very different repetitive experiences of being over there. But, yeah, did you have any moments of that, or were you still like processing this?
That's interesting, right? I guess I never really thought about it till you've mentioned it, and that's so true.
Because you grew up until 16 being able to feel relatively like that, right? Like you could.
Well, Malaysia's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because while I love the country, it's where I grew up and stuff, but Indians are still treated as second-class citizens. In that country, right?
Yep.
You know, the Malay Muslims are the dominant race. They have more rights, access to more resources, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I was, I didn't have those opportunities. I was lucky through my mom and dad. But in Malaysia, it's still quite race-based, right?
You're a guest in the country.
Yeah, you're a guest in your own country. And I always said, people ask me why I love Australia so much, as I say, well, here I have the same rights as everyone else.
Okay.
In Malaysia, even the country I was born in, I don't have the same rights as everyone else.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'd say, actually, till you mentioned it, I've never really thought about it that way. I think for me, I was so in my head that every time I opened my mouth, they just knew I was a foreigner, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't speak Hindi, I didn't speak Tamil, none of those languages. People refused to accept it.
Yeah.
And without a beard, I look less South Asian. And like they would just continue to speak to me in Hindi. That's my experience in India, is that people refused to accept the fact that I didn't speak Hindi.
Yeah.
And would just continue to speak. It was, you walk into a shop and they just be like, no, they just kept, you must speak Hindi. I was like, I don't. I speak Malay. I speak English. But like, you must speak Hindi. I was like, I don't.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if there's some area like in Tamil Nadu perhaps where you could use Malay.
Yeah, well, I really want to go, if I do go back to India, I do want to go south. I think going to Sri Lanka is really important to me.
Yeah.
It's where my grandmother is from. She's Tamil, from Jaffna.
Have you had much experiences there?
No, I've never been.
Never been?
Never been.
Oh, wow. You went to India, Delhi.
Well, we were going to go.
Quick trip.
Well, we went in 2019, 2020, February 2020.
Wow, okay.
Just before COVID hit. And then we wanted to go to Sri Lanka, but currently it's with the war and everything that's going on over there. It was like, give it a couple of years. But I do want to spend time in Sri Lanka, spend time in south of India. And I think I'd probably feel a little bit more at home down that end.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a weird one, right? Because like my mum is Punjabi, fair skin, North speaking.
Yeah.
Dad is Sri Lankan, Tamil. So you're kind of never really in either camps. You're not Punjabi, but you're not Tamil either. You're half and half.
Right.
And you don't, because I don't speak either languages. I never really fell into either one of those categories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the older I get, I definitely find myself trending towards more, identifying more with South Asian, Sri Lankan Tamil culture and that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how, like, did you ever have like this feeling of like you were shortchanged that you didn't have any language transfer for South Asian languages, or how does that feel when you go back there and people look at you, expect to speak a certain language?
Yeah, it felt foreign actually.
Yeah.
It's weird, right? You expect to go to a country like me go down like, oh well, this is where my ancestors are. Both sides of my family are from India, and
Yeah.
like you hear so much about it.
Yeah.
But I never felt more foreign in the country.
Right.
Which is a really weird.
Never felt more foreign.
I never felt more foreign.
Whoa.
Yeah, because it was a weird one because I never felt more foreign in India than I have anywhere else in the world.
That's so interesting that we've had like very polar experiences.
It's so different, right? And that's the thing. Everyone always talks to me about how great India is, and like my white friends and everyone.
Yeah,
it's like, oh my god, it's so cultural. Like,
so cultural.
I'm like, hey, cool. I guess the thing is for them, it's like the food, right? I'm like, well, this is nothing of the food is like special to me because it's what we grew up on, right?
Right.
And so that's one side. But then like the people were lovely, but it still felt really foreign. So the weird thing is the country that I felt had the most welcomed ever is Nepal.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Nepal.
And which parts of?
Kathmandu, Pokhara, in and around.
Yeah.
I went there with my dad for 2 weeks, hiking, and that was so. Side note, but India was an interesting. I think I need to go to Sri Lanka, and I learn more about like my dad's side of the family and see that side of things a little bit more before I can make a final judgment. But yeah, it was a weird one.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's so different because I remember when we caught up last, we had the same conversation about this, and you're like, "Nah, all this," and I was like, "No, I had the opposite reaction."
Yeah. That's fascinating. Like, I guess I, despite being born in Dubai, and then sort of bouncing around Sri Lanka, visiting Australia, and then migrating when I was 18 months. The very, very young ages, you're not really going to take in those experiences. Maybe somewhere in your body, you get this idea that you're a migrant, and maybe that has seeded my kind of nomadic behavior in the past. But yeah, notionally, just I got to know Western Sydney, and like not a very multicultural area in the mid 80s at the time. I think Filipinos was one multicultural group that I remember that was significant, but my dad, being an accountant, wanted to set us up in Western Sydney and buy a place where he could afford, whereas the rest of his family, all of his 7, 8 siblings and parents, like migrated to Sydney and lived in the eastern suburbs within a couple of years of each other. And then he's like, nope, financially frugal and sound person. He's like, I'm going to go over here, live where I can afford, even though St. Clair, the suburb, was next to Mount Druitt, and it had, that sort of Logan-esque kind of stain on it. And he's like, no, I'm just going to go be there where I can afford. And of course, property booms at the time made it, jump in value over that time. And we had, we went right in the throes of Mount Druitt, but that was our local connection to the train line. And we had great experiences there. Those are the days where you still had yearly train tickets that were worth some hundreds of dollars. And Dad dropped his train ticket at the train station one day. It was handed in. Like anyone could have just like had a year of train travel for free.
That's it.
And you get these sort of like, these different narratives around these places. So you've moved to Logan. You're in this school of white people that are washing over you. That the little trio of possible careers, how did that influence your like final years of schooling, like the subjects that you chose, that sort of thing? Did you gear them in that kind of financial or legal direction?
No, I think when I came over here, and on the note in the school, it's like it was a great, like everyone was very welcoming. I think one thing about Australians, maybe where I was, and maybe I was a lucky one. I didn't face that sort of discrimination or racism. All I really had was a lot of people in school who were very interested and excited to have somebody that wasn't from
Okay.
You know, wasn't from Australia. And my group of friends back then were very excited to show me all the things that were Australian, from Vegemite to
Right.
pool parties to you know, cricket, which I never played in my life.
Yeah.
I ended up loving.
Okay.
So side note, but yeah, subjects I took. I took subjects I enjoyed.
Yeah.
English, math, drama, legal studies. I did English extension, which is like a literature one,
Right.
and I really enjoyed those subjects.
Yeah.
And then it was time for university, which is then cool, law school.
Right. Right. Did you, like, growing up quite in a literature savvy kind of household, it sounds like, did you, like, want to, I don't know, think about drama or writing or like embracing that side? Or did that seem like that sort of polarized Malaysian training of like arts is failure?
Oh, I love that stuff. So drama, I was in the school choir.
Okay.
Terrible singer, but still,
Yeah.
I was a guy, so they were like, "Cool, you
Yeah,
can sing."
we'll take your voice.
Yeah, we'll take your voice. I love drama. I did acting classes. I did private acting classes. Outside that, I wanted to be an actor, that sort of stuff, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And
Despite the art equals like
Yeah.
an actor, like professionally, like chasing that. Was that-
in school, yeah, at one point,
Okay.
yeah, I was really I love theater.
Yeah.
I still do, but I really love that whole world. I played music, you know, played the piano, played the guitar. Yeah, I don't. It's weird, right? Because I've been thinking, I've thought about this for a really long time, and I don't know what was the switch to me go, nah, that's a hobby. I need to find a real career.
Yeah.
And I kind of point that I don't blame my parents, you know, but I definitely think that my upbringing led me to think there was no other choice.
It's like you sort of internalized this rhetoric that was around you for so long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't think my parents never said to me, "No, you know, you can't do this."
Yeah.
And you know, they supported me in all my ventures, as
Yeah.
crazy as
Yeah.
any sport I wanted to play, what I wanted to do. They were incredible in that front. But I think I can never really pinpoint why I decided that, you know, arts and that whole world was not a possibility, but university was the only option.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a conscious decision or a thing where people were like, yep, you have to do this. It's just that was the only option.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
it's a weird one, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. In the last podcast here, Huda, who is a spoken word poet, articulated this far better than I will be able to now. But she said something like, black and brown bodies, people, we have such pressure on us to show the world that we are good at what we do and accomplished with what we do, that we tend to choose medicine, lawyer, engineer, like careers that are just very like black and white. It's like you know you have to go through this process. Like if you're doing medicine, you got to like go through all these exams and at the end you get this thing and you get told, oh, you are great. You are a great member of society. And do you think like it could have been some of that?
I think definitely that. And I think it's what you look at your heroes, right? I mean, we're in our 30s. And if you look back to when we were kids, who were our heroes? And growing up, like, I always kind of look at, for me, one of the people I respect a lot this day and age is someone like Usman Khawaja.
Okay, I'm not familiar. Can you?
He's a cricketer for Australia, right?
Okay, right.
Pakistani-born Australian cricketer, just won the Test, the Shane Warne like Test Cricketer of the Year.
Okay.
But me loving sports, it's like my idols were Shane Warne,
Yeah.
Glenn McGrath,
Right.
blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't see a brown guy as your hero.
Right.
Because the successful brown people are doctors, lawyers,
Right.
engineers,
Yeah.
politicians, scientists, right?
Right. Right.
Even the arts world, and I really talk about the Western world,
Yeah.
you don't see as many brown newscasters, singers, artists
Yep.
in the mainstream media. Now there's more. There's
Yeah.
definitely more. You see them on TV, you see
Yeah.
comedians, you see
Right.
very successful musicians. But 20 years ago, there wasn't really. There might have been one or two.
Yeah.
But a majority of them were, white people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you, as a kid growing up, you sort of look at who your idols are, who are the successful people, who your parents, who they listen to music, who they watch on TV, who they think are important people.
Yeah.
there were doctors, lawyers, accountants,
Yeah. Yeah.
scientists.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So if you were to look back at your childhood and if you were to see representation of other people, of other brown folk, people that look like you, being successful and thriving in creative careers, do you think that might have maybe not pushed you in that direction, but like maybe considered your dream of becoming an actor or getting into theatre a viable option?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely. I think if there was more community around that and saying, what other people can do, I think that'd be huge.
Right.
And, I think what I'm trying to do now is to show that you don't have to do those careers to be successful. And, if I can influence one person to consider, hey, maybe not so much creative, but, other worlds, other areas, startups, companies, things like that, then that's great. I think as, particularly being brown, I think we didn't realize how much an impact not having that representation across media, across creative industries had an impact on people growing up.
Right.
I mean, people who've done it, like yourself, have actually gone out and do that, and a lot of other people in your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure to be the pioneer.
Yeah. Well, but it's weird, right? Because it's still so new, right?
Yeah. And it's like messy. You got to figure out, how does this work? How does this integrate with family and this and that?
And I think it's representation, not so much to the Asian world, but to the Western world, if that makes sense. Because kids are growing up today, brown kids are growing up today in our age, that watch TV, that have watch the news, watch Netflix and that kind of stuff, and seeing representation there makes all the difference.
Right, because like growing up brown in Australia, there was basically two members that I can think of representation. One is Apu from The Simpsons, and the other one is Kamal.
Oh yeah.
And like I don't know if I was even like conscious of Kamal. And there's like a hilarious side note on the back of that. We're saying yes, those are Kamal's children, like the only other brown people I think in photo of that album. But I see his records around so many secondhand shops that I just had to buy this one.
You're right, actually. That's it. Kamal and Apu.
That's it. And then I don't know if you had this as well, but I had to get like cornered into being like the best Apu impersonator. I ended up doing that. And Apu is a blatant case. I'm not sure if you dived into it through
It's a white guy.
Harry, yeah, exactly. Hank Azaria, something like that. Have you checked out Hari Kondabolu's The Problem with Apu documentary?
I haven't watched it, but I know of it.
Yeah. And so he goes into that thing because it's a blatant case of brownface. So here you have someone replicating a stereotype, pumping it out there to the world, and it'll go out to somewhere like Logan, maybe in the mid 2000s, where in the case of your school, perhaps not many experiences with brown folks, and then you suddenly see a kid. Did you have that? Like you said, you had a pretty warm, welcoming response there. Did you have like a poo?
No, not really.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't have. So I've had a lucky experience, particularly like, and the people around me were not, they were more interested in showing me a lot about Australia and about about the culture here than it was anything else.
Right.
And I kind of put it down to a couple of things. One, I still think at the time we were still very much a novelty, particularly up in Queensland.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't really get threatened by novelties, do you?
But you're a novelty, but you're also in Pauline Hanson One Nation era Queensland.
Yeah. Oh, that was terrifying. Pauline Hanson was terrifying. Particularly coming from Malaysia, where from overseas, what you hear about Australia at the time, particularly Queensland,
it was already pumping out.
Oh yeah, it's Pauline Hanson, right?
Wow.
It was this, terrifying, and growing up in a post 9/11 world as well, being brown.
Yeah.
Didn't make life that much easier.
Yeah.
But no, but despite all this, I had very, very welcoming friends and like people who was so excited to show me everything about Australia.
Yeah.
So I think, so I definitely had a different experience in school.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think that was something about the kind of earnest enthusiasm in Logan in the mid 2000s when there was it having a big? I'm aware it's had. Well, I mean, particularly if I think of Inala, which I perhaps know a little bit more closely, but like strong representation from Indigenous community and strong East Asian and African diaspora, various multicultural elements that almost, I would imagine, dominate the landscape over the usual white dominance. Were you seeing this transition unfold in the mid 2000s, and was there that sort of earnest enthusiasm?
I think, like I say, I kind of go back to the point around the novelty. Right? I think at the time when I was in that lucky gap between, that lucky world where people were still trying to discover, more migrants were moving to Australia, less so to Queensland and that kind of stuff. So we were still very much a novelty in a lot of areas, but we weren't domineering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think people
wasn't like a fear, despite Pauline Hanson's best efforts.
Yeah, but I think there wasn't that fear. No, definitely not, and not in towards the cities and stuff like that. That Pauline Hanson sort of out.
Yeah.
Toowoomba area and that kind of stuff.
Ipswich, right? Is that?
Yeah, no, Toowoomba out that way.
Okay.
Yeah, so I definitely didn't feel that, and everybody was pretty welcoming at the time. I don't know, maybe I was oblivious to it.
Yeah.
But teachers were friendly. Everyone was just so excited. I can always remember, I never played cricket in my life.
Yeah.
And
and the assumptions.
The assumptions is you play cricket, right? So my group of friends they were all cricket mad. So they would take me to play cricket. I was terrible. I never got good at it, but I played. I played in the cricket teams. I played with my friends. It was great.
Right.
But they took me under their wing. Like I said, even things like, you have to try. They would bring in things like Vegemite because they wanted me to try Vegemite. It was a huge thing for them, right?
Yeah.
They were so excited to show me all these things.
Right.
Maybe it was the school I went to. Maybe it was the community that I grew up in there. But
right.
I can't really explain it. I know a lot of people have had very different experiences around my age with racism and being targeted and that kind of stuff. But no, I really had very welcoming teachers and students and never really faced that.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the time we weren't seeing so much representation in the arts, and also I feel representation, presence, seeing myself reflected in sustainability circles is often a rare experience for me, particularly if I reflect back on when it was starting, which was early mid 2000s for me. I was studying industrial design at University of Western Sydney, and I was already taking up whatever film units I could on the side, so that was quite telling. But a compulsory stream that we had was sustainability and sustainable futures, and we spent 2 weeks doing a consumption diary. So this is 2003, 4, something around that time, and so it felt pretty new, advanced. It wasn't really in the conversation, like carbon calculator, all that sort of thing. And we just every time we got on the bus or train or turned on TV, sort of calculated all that, and we sort of saw that reflected. And it was, I think I very quickly started riding a bicycle for transport and was really connected to the passion that these teachers were showing. It was a department that was quite led and dominated by women, and the men over in other departments were like, don't listen to what those sustainability, but this is how it really is. You just got to design products. But I was still latched on to that idea, and for me it took me out of design and into sustainable event production, which I was in for a bunch of years after that. I imagine you may not have seen yourself represented in sustainable circles. What was your kind of first interest in there, and how did you sort of move into that direction?
I think, like a lot of people, being environmentally friendly has always been a topic. Growing up, it's been a bigger and bigger issue for our generation, as we see, the older generations not take any action. And we've sort of become this generation, Gen Ys, of, I guess, we just sort of waited too long, whereas the generation after us have really just got pissed off and taken action, right? But we just waited. We waited a lot. We waited for people to change from, Al Gore's documentary
Yeah.
back in the day to all these things about climate change. We just waited for the people we trusted, the boomer generation to take action, right?
Right.
And so sustainability has always been the forefront of my mind, and it wasn't until COVID where it really clicked, right? And it was sort of, well, what's the point? And you started seeing, it's weird, you see the younger generation really start to take action around it.
Yeah.
The school protests that happened around the world and that kind of stuff. And you're like, well, what am I waiting for?
Right.
I want to try and help in that sort of way. And that's sort of what led me down the path to the company I work for now.
Yeah.
A big part of, I guess, for me was that how we move in the world needs to change. And I'll say to everyone, I'm a huge car fan. I love cars.
Okay.
Absolutely love cars.
Right.
Like, I work on cars. I read about cars. I watch videos about cars. Everything. My whole life has been very much about cars.
Right.
But how we move is that's just, doesn't mean I want to be driving every day.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's alternative ways of transport.
Yes.
From e-skateboards to e-scooters to how we move things. And you don't realize how inefficient our cities are. And even you look at Brisbane, which has a pretty incredible infrastructure around cycling.
Yeah.
But it's not been designed to be friendly cycling in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's hot. There's no shade. Roads end. We focus on cars so much. I read a tweet the other day, and it's like the list of things that kids have given up to make way for cars.
Yes,
Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
and then it's like the list of things cars have made way is nothing,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And you sort of look back and you suddenly go back to your childhood of cycling down the road, cycling there, playing in the streets.
Yeah.
We don't do that now, but because there's just so much more traffic on the road. It's not as safe. You don't have quiet streets as much anymore.
Yeah.
Having, I think, micromobility and how people move around the world needs to change drastically if we are to try and improve the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And it's not it's not buying EVs, right? I think a lot of people seem to think if I buy an EV, but that doesn't solve anything. It just replaces one car with another.
Particularly if it's still like a single person transport.
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
you can see on the roads, like how many single person transports and people. And I think it goes even further with governments and communities creating towns and infrastructure that means that people don't have to commute 5 hours a day. Schools and what happens is inner cities, the public schools in inner cities are really, really good because rich people buy in that area, and but then everyone else doesn't have access to that. So I think there needs to be a bigger conversation around infrastructure.
Right. And so your journey with cycling, did you grow up with much, like what's the cycling culture that you grew up with?
I'm not a cyclist.
Okay.
So here's a big thing for me, right? I grew up cycling as a kid. Like every kid, you had a mountain bike, you cycled around, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to try and make it part of my life mission to turn cycle. I hate the fact that cycling is a sport in this country.
Yes.
I genuinely do. I think that it's a form of transport. It's commuting. It's, a question that, say, people have asked me when I say, I cycle. It's like, how often do you cycle? I'm like, I don't know. And it's been quite a recent journey for me, right? It's like, I don't turn on my Apple Watch and put on Strava and figure out how far I'm going because I don't do that in a car. So why would I do that? And
for me, it's almost like I can't remember the last time I walked anywhere. My bicycle is always attached to me.
No, and I think for me, it's not just cycling; it's micro mobility, and I say that it's scooters, it's skateboards, it's e-bikes, it's normal bikes, anything, right? It's how we move. I think that's the conversation. I think trying to bottle it to just cycling and even though I work within that field, cycling or scooters, or it's over here, it's over there. It's like, no, we need to look at it all as one. It's how we move rather than that's not cars. That's not us sitting in a big metal box when going 2Ks down the road.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not a cyclist, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But then again, if you go back long enough, most people just used it as a form of transport.
Right.
Yeah. And now we have the technology to make that easier. I don't know why we aren't embracing it more.
Yeah.
Because there was a point in time when everyone used to cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids would cycle to school, people would cycle to work because cars were too expensive.
Yeah. And our lives were a little bit more localized, right?
Yeah, we were more localized. It's funny, we've got all the technology to make our lives more localized now and make cycling and moving a lot easier, but we don't seem to embrace it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And the common resistance that that many people would have around cycling, it's like, oh, I don't want to get sweaty, oh, it's too many hills, or don't know how long it's going to take. Like, e-bikes address a lot of these concerns, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's funny, right? Talking to a lot of people, it's not about it's not the cycling part's the easy part.
Yeah.
You soon realize that actually getting on a bike and cycling, that's easy.
Yeah.
Most people can do it. A lot of people have fun. It's everything before and everything after.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's where do you lock your bike?
With the assumption that you've grown up with some cycling experience. Like I have noticed, particularly some folks from migrant backgrounds, like just didn't get exposed to that skill. And so you have this challenge of like, oh, how can we educate adults? Which my mum is included in that. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I think that's the easy part. I personally think cycling's the easy part. Actually getting on a bike and cycling down the road is the easiest part of that whole journey. It's everything before and everything after that we need to work on. You know, apartments having safe places to park their your bikes, charge your bikes, access to the equipment, something like Logan carry, you know, being able to access e-bikes at an affordable price and be able to try that flexibility, having access to helmets or, you know, helmet laws, which are a whole different kettle of fish. All those things, that's a big piece just to get people on a bike.
Yeah.
Then cycling's the easy part. And then the second part of it is parking again. It's businesses, you know, incentivizing people having showers, having places to park e-bikes, having infrastructure that exists within workplaces and schools that encourage people to cycle to school.
Right. End of trip services, right?
End of trip services, but not end of trip services. If you've ever been to, and I worked in Sydney, worked in Brisbane, and I've used end of trip facilities in both areas. It's very much designed for a what you expect the typical cyclist to be, which is a male riding a road bike of some description, parking it in a downstairs garage, hanging it on a rack, and, you know, going to the end of trip facilities, which are in a dark corner, and or you're going through a narrow lane, you're going through a car park down underneath into the back corner of an office block to park your bike. So I think we're getting there, but, you know, it should be front and center, right?
Right.
And you even think of things like shopping centers, airports. Try and go to a Westfield and try and find bicycle places to lock your bikes.
Not even in the design consideration.
It's in the corner of the car park down the back.
We tick that box.
Like done. Cool. Yeah, done. And you try and figure out how to actually get to there. You're like, okay, cool. I've got to go through with pedestrians down here, park there, and then it's in the far corner. And you go to your local Woolies and it's like, oh, cool, there's 4 bike racks there. They're about yay big that don't fit an e-bike. And that, you know, if you've got a tiny little race bike, sweet, you go, cool, I tick that box. That's all the stuff that we need to work on. And that's all the stuff that, you know, will encourage people to actually cycle.
Yes.
It's like I said, cycling's the easy part. It's all the things before, you know, getting people on a bike, having the right places for people to store their bikes at home, having the right charging, having access to those bikes. And then getting on the road's the easy part. And then all the stuff at the end. I think that's the problem. It's that we don't spend enough time on either side and we build everything for a male cycling with a backpack on a light road bike down the road.
That's right. And we are seeing a fair bit in the press now around like fires from lithium ion batteries. And my take on that is that, okay, that risk is there for any product. Like, you know, we've had phones exploding on planes that they're not going to like recall all kinds of phones. They're going to recall that kind of phone that had that issue. And my take on that is that, that risk is there for any kind of battery, and there's ways that you can manage it. But also, I think, like in my mind, like to invest in an e-bike, would be a wise choice if you're able to start at like the 3K upward range. And I feel like some of these experiences we're seeing with battery fires, like I often see in the press that like, oh, it was a secondhand thing or was an old thing, or they just bought it on eBay. And for me, it seems like that you'd really want to get into a subscription service that's thorough, or make a relationship with your dealer like you would if you bought a new car.
I think it's doing your research. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of regulation in the marketplace. It's kind of annoying because there is an opportunity now before it becomes mainstream to actually regulate it, you know, put in standards. We already have that for cars, for mobile phones, for a whole bunch of stuff. But for e-bikes and e-scooters, you know, there aren't Australian design standards. There aren't requirements, you know. Well, I'm not a biggest fan of red tape. I think it's necessary because, you know, for example, we use Bosch batteries, which are industry leaders in the markets that have standards above that's required and they're the ones pushing governments and stuff like that. And I think that's the key thing there is, you know, do your research around the brands, do your research around products. We live in Australia's this funny world where you can sell something that's not legal to use. You know, you can buy a scooter that can go 50 k's an hour, but it's illegal to use on the road, right? So I think there needs to be better regulation around that, because at the end of the day, that's the safety aspect of it that we need to consider. And we already have that. And a lot of people would say, well, you know, we don't want government overreaching. We want the market, you know, to grow. But we already have that. And it works, you know, with cars. Cars that come into Australia have to meet a safety standard. I'm not talking about registration here. That's a whole different thing. But products that I think responsibility needs to be put back a little bit on retailers, where, you know, you have to sell products that are safe. That you have to be able to meet certain standards around safety, around reliability and things like that, and put it back on the retailer to say, right, you're not allowed to sell unless it meets these requirements. Which I think now we have a bit of a free-for-all when it comes to, because once again, governments don't catch up with innovation quick enough, right? So explosion of e-bikes and scooters, and Brisbane is so far ahead of the curve compared to the other states because we've legalized this stuff a while ago, whereas the other states are just still grappling with this illegal scooters and illegal skateboards and ride shares and how it's going to work. Whereas I think Brisbane's matured as a market now. So kind of cool to see that here.
Okay. Right. I do want to finish up on your current engagement. The reason that we met is that I saw this lovely Instagram ad about a subscription service for cargo bikes. And I just saw that and it's like, brilliant. Like, I'm obsessed with leasing. I lease all kinds of things and I love that kind of subscription model. And I think so many more products and services are going to head in that direction. And then I was pleased to see, I think I reached out with an email or a DM or something. And I was curious to see this name, Navin, on the email signature. And then we met up and it's like, oh, there's another brown dude with a beard staring back at me. It's like, this is very unusual in sustainable tech subscription startups. We were just talking about choosing quality brands, choosing quality. Some e-bikes are definitely in the 3, 5, 7, 10K price range to get started in. And some people who have only bought cars before look at that and they're like, oh my God, like what? There's this much on a bike? And here we are talking about quality and regulation, but how do you do that if you have limited funds? Here is a great way to do that. Can you tell me about how you started to get involved in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a customer before I joined the company. And
was your first touch point like an Insta ad as well? Or like, how did you?
I can't remember actually. I think might have been. It was me searching to buy an e-bike and not wanting to spend $7,000 on one. And I kind of go back to that whole point what I was saying is that the cycling part's the easy part. It's getting people on a bike. And how do you get people on a bike faster? It's, you know, how do you get people on a bike safely? How do you make sure they have a good experience? And that's the game that we play. That's the world that we live in. It's that we want to get people on bikes and we want to educate people about how e-bikes and cargo e-bikes particularly can be, you know, part of your life. Because people get on the bikes and, you know, oh, wow, this is really good. This works really well. Oh, it's completely changed my life. Problem is getting people on the bikes. Because
like test rides to sell e-bike, like people get on one, they're like, they have that like childhood feeling of being on a bike for the first time.
That's it. And, you know, they're safe, they're easy. We try and take all the worry out of it. And our biggest thing is flexibility and, you know, getting people riding a bike. So it's a weekly subscription. There's no upfront costs. You can swap your accessories as often. It's only 28 days to have it. So what we get is a lot of people coming on board and trying it for 28 days and going, wow, this has changed my life. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
Or people going, oh, it's not really going to work with my life. And that's okay. That's still getting people to look outside driving 2Ks down the road,
right,
or catching an Uber, or doing. They're like, oh well, actually the e-bike's not really going to work for me,
right?
But I might have a friend that that could work really well. So I think getting people onto the bike and showing that it's easy, that there's worry free, they're on a reliable, safe product that they can fit to their lifestyle. It's a big part of what we do,
right?
And that's been the really exciting thing. Like I said, I'm not a cyclist. Most of our customers are not cyclists, but they're just mums and dads who want a better way to get their kids to school, want a better way to connect with their kids, want something that doesn't involve getting in a car driving 2Ks down the road.
Right.
So, and that for me is a big thing. Is around getting more people on the bike. We all know cycling is great for your physical health, for your mental health. It's good, better for the environment, not just from a pollution standpoint, but from a congestion standpoint. So giving people access to that through what we do is something that's really exciting to see, particularly in Brisbane, because I know the amount of people that've been on the road. These are all people who normally would drive. Or use alternative methods. Now we have more cyclists on the road, which is kind of a cool thing.
And something I love about that magic combination of particularly the turn bikes that you use. So a company that's known for folding bikes and really cut its teeth making the most of small spaces and small wheels and the added cargo capacity that allows. So we've got folding bike history, e-bike assistance, and the ability to carry a significant amount of load, which really straight away throws you down this really viable car alternative, right?
That's it. It's a second car.
Yeah.
And that's where we said, it's the second car. Some people have replaced their cars. If you can carry stuff, and most normal bikes, you can't. The bikes are great till you have to carry something, right?
Yeah.
You know as well as I do. So having a cargo bike that can carry 200 kilos is incredible. And, it means going shopping, carrying the kids, taking a dog to the vet or to the park, going to Bunnings, going to IKEA. You'll be surprised at what you can actually do on a cargo bike. And I think for a lot of people, till they see it, they're not going to believe it. So that's what we try to do, is show people.
Right. Yeah. And so started in Melbourne, Sydney, and now Brisbane. Where are we at? What's in the year ahead for Logan Carry?
Well, we're just going to get more customers, expand to other parts of Australia, grow the team in Brisbane. That's my focus. Try and get out to as many people in Queensland as we can. And try and get more people cycling.
Great. And I feel like I've like passed you on the roads a couple of times. Because there's no other brown dudes riding cargo ego bikes. Tell me, like, just quickly to finish up, what's your experience being a brown dude on an e-bike in an urban Australian city? Who's not a food delivery driver?
Well, that's the thing. If you try and go into a restaurant, they generally, if you're on you know as well as I do, if you walk into a restaurant with a bicycle helmet, you get directed over to the. It's kind of sad, but you've had that experience, right? Yeah. I feel like it's an exclusive brown dude experience thing. If you cycle and have a helmet, especially in winter, because you're wearing like a jumper or something like that, it's like over there. I'm like. Every time.
I just want to order some ramen to eat.
It's like I get takeaway. My wife will order takeaway. I've had that in Sydney. My God, be like, "Hi, I'm here to pick up takeaway." They're like, "Oh, like show me." I was like, "I don't know." She called and ordered. She sent me to pick it up, and they're like very confused, or they direct me over. Show your phone, because I think they have like an app. They show like a scan thing or something like that. Yeah. So. And I'm just like, no, I'm just, that is a brown dude riding an e-bike in Australia at the moment. It's a unique experience, I think. That's not a delivery driver.
Excellent. Well, Navin, thank you for the brown dude on an e-bike solidarity. Lovely to have you on today.